morning, everybody. Welcome to my Twitch channel. My name is Kris, this is Wizard Way, and I am going to be doing more Silmarillion reading today. Welcome to Silmarillion Saturday. We are on chapters 5 and 6 today of the Quenta Silmarillion, which is the main book of the Silmarillion. So today we are doing chapter 5, which is of Eldamar and the Princes of the Eldalier. And we also... one more, there we go. Chapter 6 we will also be covering, and that is of Feyenoor and the Unchaining of Melkor. So we will get our first look at Feyenoor today, which is awesome. He is really, like, the main instigator of most of the plot of this book. It's all Feyenoor's fault, so this will be our first look at him. There will be voice effects, and I do have an overhead camera to show you guys any of the illustrations that we hit while we read. So, welcome. Let's get started. I have just about 2 hours in order to get through these two chapters, but hopefully it will take us less, because in 2 hours I'm going live over on Don Marshall's channel. He will be doing a live watch party of the Soviet-Russian Lord of the Rings movie, and that's going to be hilarious. I've been told it is a really funny version of the movie. Or version of the book adapted to film. So that's gonna be fun. But I've never seen it before. I think I'm one of the only people who hasn't seen it yet. Hi, Gray. You're coming over early. Everyone say hi to my kitty. Yeah. So this is Gray. He's my thick boy. You came over so early. You usually wait. I love you. You have to go lay down now. Good boy, thank you. He's a good kitty. Alana likes to get up in my face. She's behind me over here. Alright. Everyone say hi, kitty. Alright, so let's get started with Chapter 5. And as per usual, I do have voice effects ready. I don't think we use them much in Chapter 5, but Chapter 6 we do. So, have fun with those. Let's get started. To angle this up just a little bit if I can. Womp. Perfect, there we go. Trying to make it so that TikTok can actually see me, but also see the background that I have displaying there. Okay, so welcome back. Let's keep on reading the Silmarillion. Gray, are you going to be a problem today? Silly boy. We'll see how the cats behave today. I'm glad you like the voice effects. It's part of the fun. Alright, let's get started. So, Chapter 5 of Eldamar and the Princes of the Eldalier. In time, the hosts of the Vanyar and the Noldor came to the last western shores of the Hitherlands. In the north, these shores, in the ancient days after the Battle of the Powers, bent ever westward, until in the northernmost parts of Arda, only a narrow sea divided Aman, upon which Valinor was built, from the Hitherlands. But this narrow sea was filled with grinding ice, because of the violence of the frosts of Melkor. Therefore, Orome did not lead the hosts of the Eldalier into the far north, but brought them to the fair lands about the river Sirion, that afterwards were named Beleriand. And from these shores... And from those shores whence first the Eldar looked in fear and wonder upon the sea, there stretched an ocean, wide and dark and deep, between them and the mountains of Aman. Now Ulmo, by the counsel of the Valar, came to the shores of Middle-earth and spoke with the Eldar, who waited there, gazing on the dark waves. And because of his words and the music which he made for them on his horns of shell, their fear of the sea was turned rather to desire. Therefore Ulmo uprooted an island, which long had stood alone amid the sea, far from either shore, since the tumults of the fall of Iluin. And with the aid of his servants he moved it, as it were a mighty ship, and anchored it in the bay of Balar, into which Sirion poured his water. Then the Vanyar and the Noldor embarked upon that isle, and were drawn over the sea, and came at last to the long shores beneath the mountains of Aman. And they entered Valinor, and were welcomed to its bliss. But the eastern horn of the island, which was deep grounded in a shoal off the mouths of Sirion, was broken asunder and remained behind, and that, it is said, was the Isle of Balar, to which afterwards Olsey often came. As a brief reminder, Olsey is one of the Maiar that is under Ulmo's direction. He's the tempestuous one, who for a time actually joined Melkor, but then he got his ass handed to him by the other Valar, and repented, and he was very, very loyal then to Ulmo. Pardon me. So Olsey liked to come there to the Isle of Balar and convene with the elves. But the Teleri remained still in Middle-earth, for they dwelt in East Beleriand far from the sea, and they heard not the summons of Ulmo until too late. And many searched still for Elway, their lord, and without him they were unwilling to depart. But when they learned that Ingwe and Fenway and their peoples were gone, then many of the Teleri pressed on to the shores of Beleriand, and dwelt thereafter near the mouths of Sirion, in longing for their friends that had departed. And they took Olwey, Elway's brother, to be their king. Long they remained by the coasts of the western sea, and Olsey and Uinen came to them and befriended them, and Olsey instructed them, sitting upon a rock near to the margin of the land, and of him they learned all manner of sea lore and sea music. Thus it came to be that the Teleri, who were from the beginning lovers of water, and the fairest singers of all the elves, were after enamored of the seas, and their songs were filled with the sound of waves upon the shore. When many years had passed, Ulmo hearkened to the prayers of the Noldor and of Fenway their king, who grieved at their long sundering from the Teleri, and besought him to bring them to Aman, if they would come. And most of them proved now willing indeed, but great was the grief of Olsey when Ulmo returned to the coasts of Beleriand to bear them away to Valinor, for his care was for the seas of Middle-earth, and the shores of the Hitherlands. And he was ill-pleased that the voices of the Teleri should be heard no more in his domain. Some he persuaded to remain, and those were the Faladrim, the elves of the Falas, who in after days had dwellings at the havens of Brythembar and Eglarest, the first mariners in Middle-earth, and the first makers of ships. Círdan the shipwright was their lord. And as a side note, Círdan is present in The Lord of the Rings. So you can tell just how old that elf is, because currently in this section of the Silmarillion we are during the time of the Two Trees of Valinor. So that's many, 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 many years before the First Age. Then if you add the First Age up with the Second Age and the Third Age, we're talking about bare minimum 7,000 to 9,000 years. So Círdan is a very old elf. But he is at the Grey Havens, and he stays there until Samwise travels over to Aman. So he stays behind even after Frodo, Galadriel, Elrond, Gandalf. When all of those characters pass over the sea, Círdan remains, because he takes the final ship with Samwise. So, little background for you. The kinsfolk and friends of Elwë Singolo also remained in the Hitherlands, seeking him yet, though they would fain have departed to Valinor and the light of the trees, if Ulmo and Olwey had been willing to tarry longer. But Olwey would be gone, and at last the main host of the Teleri embarked upon the isle, and Ulmo drew them far away. And the friends of Elway were left behind, and they called themselves Eglath, the Forsaken People. They dwelt in the woods and hills of Beleriand, rather than by the sea, which filled them with sorrow. But the desire of Aman was ever in their hearts. But when Elway awoke from his long trance, he came forth from Non Elmoth with Melian, and they dwelt thereafter in the woods in the midst of the land. Greatly though he had desired to see the sight of the trees, in the face of Melian he beheld the light of Aman, as in an unclouded mirror, and in that light he was content. His people gathered about him in joy, and they were amazed, for fair and noble as he had been, now he appeared as it were a lord of the Maiar, his hair as silver grey, tallest of all the children of Ilúvatar, and a high doom was before him. Let's pause there for a moment. Ba-ba-ba-bum. A high doom was before him. That is Tolkien's way of foreshadowing. Stating up front, and some shit's about to go down with this character. Gray, I know, I love you too. Silly kitty. You're all up in my business today, Gray. He's looking back at me like, rude. Hi. Are you gonna settle down? Question from TikTok. Didn't he give Gandalf one of the Elven Rings? Yes, that is correct. That's another way that Círdan plays into all of the plots of these books. Círdan is one of those background characters that you actually see him pretty often, but he's always in the background. I don't even know that he's given any speaking lines in the books. If so, they're very brief. Oh, I'm so glad. Thank you. Glad you guys like the lighting, thank you. And I'm glad that my voice is calming. This is just, you know, let's wake you up gently on Saturday morning, right? Do I repost these for future watching like the last week's? Yes, I do intend to do that. I do need to go back and actually download them, though, before they are lost forever. I have a bad habit of leaving things on Twitch too long. Twitch only stores your live streams for, I think, 14 days. So I need to, right after the stream, honestly, go and download the last few episodes that I've taped. But I will be editing those down a little bit, just to make them a little less tangential. And I will be reposting those up on YouTube. So if you miss something, hopefully in this next week, I'm making it a priority to get those edited and get those up over on YouTube. So they will be posted as well. I did say hi to you. Alright, but yes, Círdan was given one of the 3 Elven Rings. If I'm remembering correctly, when Celebrimbor sent the 3 away, he sent 1 directly to Galadriel, and he sent 2 to Gil-galad. Gil-galad then shared 1 with Círdan. So then we had Círdan, Gil-galad, and Galadriel. All 3 of them had the 3 Elven Rings. Now, eventually in the Second Age, when Gandalf became more of a prominent figure, and it was very clear, at least to the elves, that he was one of the Maiar, and had a truly compassionate spirit. Like, Gandalf's purpose, and this is explicitly stated by Tolkien, his purpose in going to Middle-earth was specifically to go amongst the different peoples of Middle-earth and inspire them with hope. Because the Valar knew that a lot of bad stuff was going to happen. They knew. They had seen it already, in some cases. A lot of things they had already seen in the music, and so they knew it was not going to be an easy time for the elves, for mortal men, and for the other creatures of Middle-earth. And so they sent the Istari to watch over and engage with the races of Middle-earth. The problem was that several of them got a bit reclusive and didn't really do their jobs. Iwendil, or Radagast, the Brown, he took a liking more to birds and beasts, and so he just stayed in the forest instead of engaging with the elves or men. So he kind of abandoned his purpose, whereas Gandalf stayed very, very true to it. And then Saruman, we know, got a bit power-hungry, and that's why we end up with a really not-so-good relationship between the various Istari, or wizards. Yeah, Radagast. The depiction of Radagast being covered in bird poop is hilarious and probably accurate, because he was especially fond of birds, so he would have been covered by birds all the time. So I'm not too unhappy with the depiction of him, even though it's a bit more on the comical side. But most things in The Hobbit are. They are meant more toward a younger audience, and so the characterization is a lot more amusing. Versus Lord of the Rings, it's a bit more serious. Yeah, Radagast choosing animals over people is a mood. I think several of us can relate. Yeah, Radagast, the Brown Wizard. And then, I'm blanking. I think it's Palando and... I'm blanking on the other name. The two blue wizards. They went far into, like, the west and south. And so they probably did interact with peoples in those areas, but that's outside of the main plot of the books, and so we don't hear anything about it. Alright, so most of the elves have now left Middle-earth. We had the factioning of the Teleri into the Falmari, who live on the coasts, the Sindar, who live in the forests and plains away from the sea because it brings them pain to be too close to the ocean. And then we have the other Teleri that end up going all the way over to Aman. And just as a note, because I know the two characters get a little confusing, Olwey and Elway. Olwey is the king of the Teleri. Elway, because he's the one who got lost in the forest and fell in love with Melian. Elway, or Elu Thingol, is the one that stayed behind. So Elway stayed in Middle-earth. He is the king of the Sindar elves. Thingol is how they usually refer to him in the book. And Olwey is his brother. Now, Elway has another brother, a younger brother, whose name, oddly enough, is Elmo. And descended from Elmo is Celeborn. So, to give you a basic idea of how the elves that we know of, that we already know the names of, actually relate to each other. Ithrin Luin is all you can remember about the Blue Wizards. Yeah, they kind of went poof. They went to the south and the west, the far west. So they probably did, continue with their purpose as they were instructed by the Valar, but we don't hear anything about them because they aren't in the area where the main plots of the books happen. Yeah, totally relatable. Sulad, welcome. Please, if you're over on my TikTok, think about joining over on my Twitch stream. The handle on my Twitch stream is the same as here on TikTok, but you'll be able to see all of the illustrations, and actually, perfect opportunity. We do have an illustration here that I will share. So let me switch the scene up so that you guys can see it. Alright, here we go. Oh, that didn't work. Wrong one. Here we go. There we go. So let me zoom this in so you guys can see it a bit better. So here is the illustration for this chapter. Again, all the illustrations in this version of the illustrated Silm are by Ted Nasmith. This version just happens to have a few paintings that haven't been released before, so that's pretty cool. But this is the elves being taken over onto the island that is then uprooted and taken all the way over to Valinor. Because when you're a god of the ocean, you have all the power necessary to yoink an entire island across the ocean. Yoink! So that is the passing of the elves from Middle-earth over to Valinor. You can kind of see the hinting of the Light of the Two Trees here. That far across the sea is a great light. They really are beautiful illustrations. Alright, so let's continue. I'm gonna switch back to the normal scene. So Eleuthingol stayed behind, Elway. He's the one who's married to Melian the Maya, and he is regarded as the tallest of all the children of Iluvatar. And as a note, in the Nature of Middle-earth book, there's a whole little section in, it's a part that is descriptions that Tolkien wrote down as a response to artwork that was made to promote his books. The artwork specifically for Lord of the Rings, some of it he liked, and some of it he really, really disliked. So he was happy with the characterization of Gollum, and a few of the other characters he was happy with. But then, you know, he hated the way that they had drawn the Witch King and the various ring wraiths. The Nazgul were not to his liking. And he makes a point of saying, you know, the Nazgul are invisible. Like, the only reason they can be seen at all is because they wear cloaks that drape over them. And they wear gauntlets because they ride horses. But if they were just standing there, you wouldn't be able to see them at all. So I thought that was an interesting detail. And I'm like, yeah, J.K. Rowling totally ripped off the ring wraiths to make the Dementors. Rip off! But in that same section, he goes on about the heights of the characters, so that you know for sure that hobbits are between the heights of 3.5 and 4 feet, specifically. And that, you know, the kings of Numenor were descended from the elves, and the elves were generally taller than humans. But we're talking, like, minimum 6 foot for elves. That's tall. It's a lot taller than I thought. So, elves are tall, and if Eleuthingol here, if Elway is the tallest of all the children of Iluvatar, dude probably was at like 7.5 feet tall. Very tall. You just noticed my shirt? Yeah, this is a new one. This is a new one that I just designed. This is my Thran-Daddy shirt. I made this design to try out a new shop that will be attached to my website when I open it. So this isn't available yet, but when my website goes live, you will be able to get this. I sort of adapted part of my logo, my leaf logo, and Thran-Daddy, plus it's written down in Elvish here. So, Thran-Daddy. Randy Thrandy. We all love Thranduil. He could step on us any day and we'd thank him for it. Alright, I need to shift really quickly and then we'll continue finally. I really should be sitting in a different position. I like to sit on my legs, but that means that they go numb. And right now one of them is completely numb. Alright, so Elway stayed behind, and he is silver-haired and tallest of the children of Iluvatar, and a high doom was before him. Ba-ba-ba-bum. Let's continue. Now Osse followed after the host of Olwey, and when they were come to the bay of Eldamar, which is Elvenhome, he called to them, and they knew his voice, and begged Ulmo to stay their voyage, and Ulmo granted their request, and at his bidding Osse made fast the island and rooted it to the foundations of the sea. Ulmo did this the more readily, for he understood the hearts of the Teleri, and in the council of the Valar he had spoken against the summons, thinking that it were better for the Quendi to remain in Middle-earth. The Valar were little pleased to learn what he had done, and Fenway grieved when the Teleri came not, and yet more when he learned that Elway was forsaken, and knew that he should not see him again, unless it were in the halls of Mandos. But the island was not moved again, and stood there alone in the bay of Eldamar, and it was called Tol Eressëa, the Lonely Island. There the Teleri abode as they wished under the stars of heaven, and yet within sight of Aman and the deathless shore. And by that long sojourn apart in the Lonely Island was caused the sundering of their speech from that of the Vanyar and the Noldor. So basically, the Teleri developed their own dialect of Elvish because they remained on this island instead of joining the other elves in Valinor. To these the Valar had given a land and a dwelling place, referring to the Vanyar and the Noldor. Even among the radiant flowers of the tree-lit gardens of Valinor, they longed still at times to see the stars, and therefore a gap was made in the great walls of the Pelori, and there, in a deep valley that ran down to the sea, the Eldar raised a green hill. Tuna it was called. From the west the light of the trees fell upon it, and its shadow lay ever eastward, and to the east it looked towards the bay of Elvenhome, and the Lonely Isle, and the shadowy seas. Then through the Calakiria, the Pass of Light, the radiance of the Blessed Realm streamed forth, kindling the dark waves to silver and gold, and it touched the Lonely Isle, and its western shore grew green and fair. There bloomed the first flowers that ever were east of the mountains of Aman. Upon the crown of Tuna, the city of the elves was built, and white walls and terraces of Tirion. The highest of the towers of that city was the Tower of Ingwe, Mindon Eldalieva, whose silver lamp shone far out into the mists of the sea. Few are the ships of mortal men that have seen its slender beam. In Tirion upon Tuna, the Vanyar and the Noldor dwelt long in fellowship. And since of all things in Valinor they loved most the white tree, Yavanna made for them a tree like to lesser image of Telperion, save it did not give light of its own being. Galathilion it was named in the Sindarin tongue. This tree was planted in the courts beneath the Mindon, and there flourished, and its seedlings were many in Eldamar. Of these, one was afterwards planted in Tol Eressëa, and it prospered there, and was named Celeborn. Thence came, in the fullness of time, as is elsewhere told, Nimloth, the white tree of Numenor. Manwë and Varda loved most the Vanyar, the fair elves, but the Noldor were beloved of Aule, and he and his people came often among them. Great became their knowledge and their skill, yet even greater was their thirst for more knowledge, and in many things they soon surpassed their teachers. They were changeful in speech, for they had great love of words, and sought ever to find names more fit for all things that they knew or imagined. And it came to pass that the man... Pardon me, I totally mispronounced that word. And it came to pass that the masons of the house of Fenway, quarrying in the hills after stone, for they delighted in the building of high towers, They first discovered earth gems, and brought them forth in countless myriads. And they devised tools for the cutting and shaping of gems, and carved them in many forms. They hoarded them not, but gave them freely, and by their labor enriched all Valinor. The Noldor afterwards came back to Middle-earth, and this tale tells mostly of their deeds. Therefore the names and kinship of their princes may here be told, in that form which these names later bore in the tongue of the elves of Beleriand. What they mean by that is the names that they're going to give are primarily going to be in Sindarin, not in Quenya. So, though we will learn most of these elves' Quenyan names, their original given names, typically in the Silmarillion, in the book itself, they will be referred to by their Sindarin names. So I realize how confusing that will become, but that is why I'm doing these supplemental streams, where I go into all of the names of everybody that gets mentioned in the book. So if you get really confused with names, even while I'm reading, please check out those extra streams that are going to be separate, but it's going to be vocabulary streams. Up until last week, I lumped that in with the normal stream, but it's going to be separate. Gonna be separate from now on. Because it's just a lot of detail stuff. Because I'm a geek and I love Elvish. Oh, thank you so much for the roses. Thank you, Steph. Alright, where were we? So most of the names in the book are going to be in Sindarin, just as a heads up. Oh, no problem, Zoe. I'm happy to help. If you get confused on anything, please feel free to ask questions. Fenway was king of the Noldor. The sons of Fenway were Feyenoor and Fingolfin and Finarfin. But the mother of Feyenoor was Miriel Sirinde, whereas the mother of Fingolfin and Finarfin was Indis of the Vanyar. Feyenoor was the mightiest in skill of word and of hand, more learned than his brothers. His spirit burned as a flame. Fingolfin was the strongest and most steadfast, and the most valiant. Finarfin was the fairest, and the most wise of heart, and afterwards he was a friend of the sons of Olwey, lord of the Teleri, and had to wife Eärwen, the swan maiden of Alqualonde, Olwey's daughter. The 7 sons of Feyenoor were Maedhros the Tall, Maglor the Mighty Singer, whose voice was heard far over land and sea, Celegorm the Fair, and Caranthir the Dark, Curufin the Crafty, who inherited most his father's skill of hand, and the youngest Amrod and Amras, who were twin brothers, alike in mood and face. In later days they were great hunters in the woods of Middle-earth, referring to all of them. And a hunter also was Celegorm, who in Valinor was a friend of Orome, and often followed the Vala's horn. The sons of Fingolfin were Fingon, who was afterwards king of the Noldor in the north of the world, and Turgon, lord of Gondolin. Their sister was Aredhel the White. She was younger in the years of the Eldar than her brothers, and when she was grown to full stature and beauty, she was tall and strong, and loved much to ride and hunt in the forests. There she was often in the company of the sons of Feyenoor, her kin, but to none was her heart's love given. Arfaniel she was called, the White Lady of the Noldor, for she was pale, though her hair was dark, and she was never arrayed but in silver and white. The sons of Finarfin were Finrod, the Faithful, who was afterwards named Felagund, Lord of Caves, Orodreth, Angrod, and Aignor. Again, Finrod, Orodreth, Angrod, and Aignor. These four were as close in friendship with the sons of Fingolfin as though they were all brothers. A sister they had, Galadriel, most beautiful of all the house of Fenway. Her hair was lit with gold as though it had caught in a mesh of the radiance of Lorelin. And there is a pause there and another illustration. So let's switch over to our illustration screen. This one might be a little more difficult to place. It's on the opposite side of the book. So this is actually an illustration I had not seen before. So this one is specifically of the ships of the Teleri. And based on where the lighting is coming from, this is actually looking from Valinor toward Tol Eressëa. So this is the Lonely Isle in the background, back here. So that is actually the island, that is not Valinor, because the light from the two trees would be coming from here over toward the side. Such a pretty picture. And I apologize that my camera doesn't really do it justice. The coloring on my camera doesn't pick up the full glory of the page. But for those over on TikTok, this is a picture of swan-like ships. They're all white, and they are being poled through the sea, not necessarily through oars, being, driven by oars, but being poled by great hosts of geese, or swans. Hi, Alana. Keep moving, kitten bed. Don't mess with the cameras if you would. Come on. I know, I love you too, and Gray is in the bed, so you're gonna have to jump over. Alana? Keep moving, kitten bed. There we go. Good lord. Sorry about that. So, very pretty picture. Thought I would want to share that with you guys. So, back to our other scene. So there are some descriptions of the various main characters of the House of Fenway. Now, this will get pretty confusing over time, but hopefully I will be able to remind you guys who is whom. So, once again, just to review, Fenway has 3 sons, also a couple daughters, but they don't get mentioned in here. So, Fenway, who is the High King of the Noldor, has 3 main sons from 2 different wives. The first son is Feyenoor, whom we will go into greater detail about. His mother is named Miriel. And then the other brothers are Fingolfin and Finarfin. Fingolfin is the valiant one. Finarfin has blonde hair, which is odd for a Noldo. But he has blonde hair, and from his line is where we get Galadriel. So for now, the main characters that you need to be concerned with are going to be Fenway, at the top of this life chain here, and then his 3 sons, Fëanor, Fingolfin, and Finarfin. Fëanor has 7 sons, the first 2 being Maedhros and Maglor. Yes, KP Birdman in chat is totally right. Fenway has 5 kids. He has 3 sons and 2 daughters. The 2 daughters aren't really mentioned in the Silmarillion, but they do exist. And it's my theory because later on we'll read about Gwyndor once we reach like the story of Turambar. Gwyndor is one of the minor characters. He's said to be a prince of the Noldor, but it's never said where he comes from in the line of succession. It is my belief that he is descended from one of those daughters. Findis, I believe. That was my guess. It's an educated guess. But sometimes you will see that people are mentioned to be princes or princesses of the Noldor, but they aren't actually given context of where they are in the family tree. So when that happens, typically it means that they are descended from the females of Finway's line, and we just don't really get much background on them, because they are not deemed to be important enough. Thanks, Tolkien. Tolkien really doesn't give a lot of credit to the ladies in his stories. Alright, shifting once again. Okay. So, as I was saying, Feyenoord has 7 sons, but the 2 eldest are Maedhros and Maglor, and you will hear quite a lot about them as we go through the book. And then we have Cellegorm, Caranthir, Curfin, Amrod, and Amras. So there are a lot of them, and they all have multiple names, so I guarantee they'll get a little confusing, but we will try to go through them every so often to refresh the memory. Of Fingolfin's line, most important is going to be Fingon, which is his eldest son, and Aravel, who is the younger daughter of the group of kids. She becomes important when we get to Maeglin. That'll be later in the book. Just foreshadowing for you guys. And of Finarfin, the most important one is going to be Galadriel, ultimately, but his eldest son, Finrod. My brain short-circuited there. Finrod Felagund. So Fingon and Finrod are 2 different characters. Again, it's gonna get confusing. But think of it this way. Finrod, his hair is gold. So think goldenrod, if that helps. Finrod has goldenrod hair. Like Galadriel. That's her elder brother. Alright, so that's a bit of a review of all the names that were just dropped. Because Tolkien likes to write this like a history text. Alright, let's continue. Here must be told how the Teleri came at last to the land of Aman. Through a long journey they dwelt in Tol Eressëa, but slowly their hearts were changed, and were drawn towards the light that flowed out over the sea to the lonely isle. They were torn between the love of the music of the waves upon their shores, and the desire to see again their kindred and to look upon the splendor of Valinor. But in the end, desire of the light was the stronger. Therefore, Ulmo, submitting to the will of the Valar, sent them to Osse, their friend. Sent to them Osse, their friend, and he, though grieving, taught them the craft of shipbuilding. And when their ships were built, he brought them, as his parting gift, many strong-winged swans. Then the swans drew the white ships of the Teleri over the windless sea, and thus at last, and latest, they came to Aman and the shores of Eldamar. So the picture that we saw was actually those ships that Osse taught them how to make, and all of his swans that he gifted them. There they dwelt, and if they wished, they could see the light of the trees, and could tread the golden streets of Valmar, and the crystal stairs of Tirion upon Tuna, the green hill. But most of all they sailed in their swift ships on the waters of the bay of Elvenhome, or walked in the waves upon the shore, with their hair gleaming in the light beyond the hill. Many jewels the Noldor gave them, opals and diamonds and pale crystals, which they strewed upon the shores and scattered in the pools. Marvelous were the beaches of Elendë in those days. And many pearls they won for themselves from the sea. And their halls were of pearl, and of pearl were the mansions of Olwey at Aqualonde, the haven of the swans, lit with many lamps. For that was their city, and the haven of their white ships. And those were made in the likeness of swans, with beaks of gold and eyes of golden jet. The gate of that harbor was an arch of living rock sea-carved, and it lay upon the confines of Eldamar, north of the Calakiria, where the light of the stars was bright and clear. As the ages passed, the Vanyar grew to love the land of the Valar and the full light of the trees, and they forsook the city of Tirion upon Tuna, and dwelt thereafter upon the mountain of Manwë, or about the plains and woods of Valinor, and became sundered from the Noldor. But the memory of Middle-earth under the stars remained in the hearts of the Noldor, and they abode in the Calakiria, and in the hills and valleys within sound of the western sea. And though many of them went often about the land of the Valar, making far journeys in search of the secrets of land and water and all living things, yet the peoples of Tuna and Aqualonde drew together in those days. Fenway was king in Tirion, Olwey in Aqualonde, but Ingwe was ever held the high king of all the elves. He abode thereafter at the feet of Manwë upon Taniquetil. Feyenoor and his sons abode seldom in one place for long, but travelled far and wide upon the confines of Valinor, going even to the borders of the dark and the cold shores of the outer sea, seeking the unknown. Often they were guests in the halls of Aule, but Celegorm went rather to the house of Orome, and there he got great knowledge of birds and beasts, and all their tongues he knew. For all living things that are or have been in the kingdom of Arda, save only the fell and evil creatures of Melkor, lived then in the land of Aman. And there also were many other creatures that have not been seen upon Middle-earth, and perhaps never now shall be, since the fashion of the world was changed. Thus ends chapter 5. So I do want to re-show the illustration that we were looking at. There we go. So once again, these are the ships of the Teleri. Alce is the one who taught them how to build ships for themselves. And you see the symbolism of the swan used quite a lot with the Teleri. Think of it as their national bird. So we have the ships being pulled by all of these beautiful swans. So they are swans, not geese. My apologies. But let's continue, shall we? Got a lot more to cover. So that was chapter 5. It was all about the princes of the Eldalia and all the information about Eldamar. Chapter 6 is of Feyenoord and the unchaining of Melkor. Now the three kindreds of the Eldar were gathered at last in Valinor, and Melkor was chained. This was the noontide of the Blessed Realm, the fullness of its glory and its bliss. Long in tale of years, but in memory too brief. In those days the Eldar became full-grown in stature of body and of mind, and the Noldor advanced ever in skill and knowledge. And the long years were filled with their joyful labors, in which many new things fair and wonderful were devised. Then it was that the Noldor first bethought them of letters, and Rúmil of Tirion was the name of the lore master who first achieved fitting signs for the recording of speech and song, some for graving upon metal or in stone, others for drawing with brush or with pen. As a side note, that written language is completely different from the Elvish that you guys are used to. Like the Elvish on my shirt, this is the alphabet of Feyenoor. That is the Feyenoorian script, which Feyenoor comes up with later. But originally, the letters that were created by Rúmil were used to write not just Elvish words, but Valarin words. So some texts you might see little hints of what looks like a different form of Elvish, but it's actually written vertically. So if you see what looks to be kind of Elvish, but it's written top to bottom, that is the alphabet of Rúmil. Okay. Photobombed by the cat. Yeah. They're both down there now, at least. We'll see if they stay there. Probably not. In that time was born in Eldamar, in the house of the king of Tirion, upon the crown of Tuna, the eldest of the sons of Fenway, and the most beloved. Fenway was his name, but by his mother he was called Feyenoor, spirit of fire, and thus he is remembered in all the tales of the Noldor. Miriel was the name of his mother, who was called Serinde, because of her surpassing skill in weaving and needlework, for her hands were more skilled to fineness than any hands even among the Noldor. The love of Fenway and Miriel was great and glad, for it began in the Blessed Realm in the days of bliss. But in the bearing of her son, Miriel was consumed in spirit and body, and after his birth she yearned for release from the labor of living. And when she had named him, she said to Fenway,
"Never again shall I bear child, for strength that would have nourished the life of many has gone forth into Feyenoord."
Then Fenway was grieved, for the Noldor were in the youth of their days, and he desired to bring forth many children into the bliss of Aman. Sorry. Let me try that again. And Fenway was grieved, for the Noldor were in the youth of their days, and he desired to bring forth many children into the bliss of Aman. And he said,
"Surely there is healing in Aman. Here all weariness can find rest."
But when Miriel languished still, Fenway sought the counsel of Manwë, and Manwë delivered her to the care of Urmo in Lórien. At their parting, for a little while, as he thought, Fenway was sad, for it seemed an unhappy chance that the mother should depart and miss the beginning, at least, of the childhood days of her son.
"It is indeed unhappy,"
said Miriel.
"and I would weep if I were not so weary. But hold me blameless in this, and in all that may come after."
She went then to the gardens of Lórien and lay down to sleep. But though she seemed to sleep, her spirit indeed departed from her body, and passed in silence to the halls of Mandos. The maidens of Este tended the body of Miriel, and it remained unwithered, but she did not return. Then Fenway lived in sorrow, and he went often to the gardens of Lórien, and sitting beneath the silver willows beside the body of his wife, he called her by her names. But it was unavailing, and alone in all the blessed realm he was deprived of joy. After a while he went to Lorien no more. So you can feel properly bad for poor Fenway. And this was pretty much unheard of. Like, no one had ever basically died in childbirth. But the way that elves conceive their children, it's very much full of intent. So trigger warning, but elves cannot be products of rape. Not really. Coercion, perhaps, but the intent has to actually be there from both parties in order to conceive a kid. It has to be intentional. So Maeglin is a little bit in that gray area of coercion, but he was still desired. His mother wanted to have him. But we do end up with poor Feyenoord being born, knowing his mother for a very short time, and then his mother basically dying, having given him so much of her spirit that she couldn't be bothered with living anymore. And that's so sad. But after a time, Fenway, instead of wallowing in his grief, he finally stops going to spend time with the unwithering body of his wife. So eventually, it probably just becomes too painful, and he stops going to Lorien, which in Valinor, Lorien is the place of rest and the place of dreams. So he stops going, which means he spends most of his time after that in Tirion upon Tuna. And I know, Tuna is a really funny name to give a hill on which lies a great city. But Tirion upon Tuna is one of the main places in Valinor. Alright, continuing. All his love he gave thereafter to his son, and Feyenoord grew swiftly, as if a secret fire were kindled within him. He was tall and fair of face and masterful, his eyes piercingly bright, and his hair raven dark. In the pursuit of all his purposes, eager and steadfast. Few ever changed his courses by counsel, none by force. He became of all the Noldor, then or after, the most subtle in mind and the most skilled in hand. In his youth, bettering the work of Rumiel, he devised those letters which bear his name, and which the Eldar used ever after. And he it was who, first of the Noldor, discovered how gems greater and brighter than those of the earth might be made with skill. The first gems that Fëanor made were white and colorless, but being set under starlight, they would blaze with blue and silver fires brighter than Helluin. And other crystals he made also, wherein things far away could be seen small but clear, as with the eyes of the eagles of Manwë. Seldom were the hands and mind of Fëanor at rest. To pause for a moment, the stones, the jewels that he makes that can help you see things afar, these are the Palantir, the Palantiri. So the Palantir that we see in Lord of the Rings were actually made by Fëanor. They are old stones. But he made them with skill. They weren't carved from the earth. That's something that Fëanor managed to do. Makes him special. He's a special snowflake. And also, the name was dropped in here again, Helluin. Helluin is... I'm forgetting which star it's meant to represent in the night sky, but it's a blue star, a very bright blue star. Its name actually means blue fire. or blue light. So originally Fëanor made stones that were clear, but under the starlight became really bright blues and silvers. Then he made the Palantir, which you could see things from afar. And we continue onwards. While still in his early youth, he wedded Nerdanel, the daughter of the great smith named Matan, among those of the Noldor most dear to Aule. And of Matan he learned much in the making of things in metal and in stone. Nerdanel also was firm of will, but more patient than Fëanor, desiring to understand minds rather than to master them. And at first she restrained him when the fire of his heart grew too hot, but his later deeds grieved her, and they became estranged. 7 sons she bore to Fëanor. Her mood she bequeathed in part to some of them, but not to all. It's a subtle burn. She gave her patient, mindful spirit to only some of her children. Probably through no fault of her own. So basically, some of the sons resembled Nerdanel, and others resembled Fëanor, and it becomes very clear who took after Fëanor in the books. Now it came to pass that Fenway took as his second wife Indis the Fair. She was a Vanya, close kin of Ingwe the High King, golden-haired and tall, and in all ways unlike Miriel. Fenway loved her greatly, and was glad again. But the shadow of Miriel did not depart from the house of Fenway, nor from his heart. And of all whom he loved, Fëanor had ever the chief share of his thought. The wedding of his father was not pleasing to Fëanor, and he had no great love for Indis, nor for Fingolfin and Finarfin, her sons. He lived apart from them, exploring the land of Aman, or busying himself with the knowledge and the crafts in which he delighted. In those unhappy things which later came to pass, and in which Fëanor was the leader, many saw the effect of this breach within the house of Fenway, judging that if Fenway had endured his loss and been content with the fathering of his mighty son, the courses of Fëanor would have been otherwise, and great evil might have been prevented. For the sorrow and the strife in the house of Fenway is graven in the memory of the Noldorian elves. But the children of Indis were great and glorious, and their children also, and if they had not lived, the history of the Eldar would have been diminished. Again, foreboding. Oh, thanks. Glad you like it. It's colorful. Most things in my life are. Oh, you can't see, it's covered by the background. Part of that is my microphone. It likes to cover me here. So, let me try and shift my camera over here on TikTok. Put a bookmark down really quickly. Let's fix this. Okay. That should help. I hope. I apologize that shifting, especially because I'm wearing green today, I'm sure I am coming in and out a lot of focus, so I apologize for that. Though we kind of know that it's Silmarillion Saturday, so let me take the filter off here, and then you'll just be able to see my background, and that's not a big deal to me. Hi. I'm getting photobombed by my cat again. Where can I change the effects? There we go. There we go. Hopefully that helps a bit. So now you guys won't have the background flickering in front. Hi, Gray. Thank you. Good boy. Okay, so hopefully that helps over on TikTok. Do feel free to join me over on Twitch, though. My handle there is the same as on TikTok. And you guys will be able to hear the voice effects that I do, and also see any illustrations that are in the book. Alright, so basically, if Fenway had been contented with only having the one child, perhaps Feyenoord wouldn't have been as bitter as he was, and things might not have gone down as badly as they did afterwards. But you can see the grief of Feyenoord presenting itself in that that determination to excel in all other things. Basically, he took all his feels out on the forge and through his craftsmanship. So that was his way of compensating and dealing with his grief, but also his way of trying to, in some ways, restrain his attitude with his father about his father remarrying, because he was not happy about that. So that sort of strife, as much as he loved his father very, very much, I think there was always a bit of bitterness and strife between them. Feyenoord not being happy with him and wondering how he could ever take a second wife after his mother. But Fenway loved Feyenoord. Like, there is so much love in his heart for Feyenoord. And in its way, Feyenoord is the only remaining piece of his wife. So I'm sure he doted on Feyenoord and spoiled that kid rotten as part of dealing with his own grief. So it's a double-edged sword. You know, it's like everyone deserves to find happiness again when they experience a loss like that. But sometimes finding that happiness also comes with consequences, and in Feyenoord's case, the consequences become very, very clear. So basically, Tolkien is saying that perhaps if Fenway had been contented, Feyenoord wouldn't have turned out as he did. But if he had been contented, that would mean that Fingolfin and Finarfin and all of their children, all of their entire lines, would never have been born in the first place. And those elves are amazing. So the history of Middle-earth would not be the same, but it would be diminished without all these other characters. Now, even while Fëanor and the craftsmen of the Noldor worked with delight, foreseeing no end to their labors, and while the sons of Indis grew to their full stature, the noontide of Valinor was drawing to its close. For it came to pass that Melkor, as the Valar had decreed, completed the term of his bondage, dwelling for the 3 ages in the duress of Mandos, alone. At length, as Manwë had promised, he was brought again before the thrones of the Valar. Then he looked upon their glory and their bliss, and envy was in his heart. He looked upon the children of Ilúvatar that sat at the feet of the mighty, and hatred filled him. He looked upon the wealth of bright gems, and he lusted for them. But he hid his thoughts, and postponed his vengeance. Before the gates of Valmar, Melkor abased himself at the feet of Manwë, and sued for pardon, vowing that if he might be made only the least of the free people of Valinor, he would aid the Valar in all their works, and most of all in the healing of the many hurts that he had done to the world. And Nienna aided his prayer, but Mandos was silent. Then Manwë granted him pardon, but the Valar would not yet suffer him to depart beyond their sight and vigilance, and he was constrained to dwell within the gates of Valmar. But fair-seeming were all the words and deeds of Melkor at that time, and both the Valar and the Eldar had profit from his aid and counsel, if they sought it, and therefore in a while he was given leave to go freely about the land, and it seemed to Manwë that the evil of Melkor was cured. For Manwë was free from evil and could not comprehend it. And he knew that in the beginning, in the thought of Ilúvatar, Melkor had been even as he, and he saw not to the depths of Melkor's heart, and did not perceive that all love had departed from him forever. But Ulmo was not deceived, and Tulkas clenched his hands whenever he saw Melkor his foe go by. For if Tulkas is slow to wrath, he is slow also to forget. But they obeyed the judgment of Manwë, for those who will defend authority against rebellion must not themselves rebel. Now in his heart Melkor most hated the Eldar, both because they were fair and joyful, and because in them he saw the reason for the arising of the Valar, and his own downfall. Therefore all the more did he feign love for them and seek their friendship, and he offered them the service of his lore and the labor in any great need. And he offered them the service of his lore and labor in any great deed that they would do. The Vanyar indeed held him in suspicion, for they dwelt in the light of the trees and were content, and to the Teleri he gave small heed, thinking them of little worth, tools too weak for his designs. But the Noldor he took delight in the knowledge... But the Noldor he took delight in, the hidden knowledge that he could reveal to them. And some hearkened to words that it would have been better for them never to have heard. Melkor indeed declared afterwards that Feyenoord had learned much art from him in secret, and had been instructed by him in the greatest of all his works. But he lied in his lust and his envy, for none of the Eldalier ever hated Melkor more than Fëanor son of Fenway, who first named him Morgoth. And snared though he was in the webs of Melkor's malice against the Valar, he held no converse with him, and took no counsel from him. For Fëanor was driven by the fire of his own heart only, working ever swiftly and alone. And he asked the aid and sought the counsel of none that dwelt in Aman, great or small, save only and for a little while of Nerdanel the Wise, his wife. And thus ends chapter 6. So that's our first look at Fëanor. That is our first look. So, Fëanor is a character, for sure. Hey, Velvet Von Black, welcome. It's nice to see you in my stream. Hopefully you have gone up to my Twitch stream, if you're not there already. But welcome. So, we just finished chapter 6. And we actually got through that pretty quickly. But because I'd still have to prepare for my next live stream, which is at noon, it's only an hour away, I'm going to be over on Don Marshall's channel, because we are doing a live watch party of the Russian version of the Silmarillion. Or not the Lord of the Rings. So we are doing a Soviet-Russian version of the Lord of the Rings. It's going to be very amusing. In Soviet Russia, rings Lord you. So we will be having fun with that. So please feel free to join me over on Don Marshall's channel in another hour. We will be having a lot of fun over there. But yeah, so chapters 5 and 6, we got to see a lot of names were dropped. I know that that's going to be a bit overwhelming, but I will be doing a stream in the next week that will be sort of a makeup stream, where we will summarize what was read for the last 2 weeks, and I will also be going through all of the names and vocabulary, all of the non-English stuff, which is mostly in either Quenya or Sindarin. Most of the things in the Silmarillion, once we get past the stuff that takes place in Valinor, the stuff that's in Valinor tends to happen in Quenya, But once you pass that and everything's happening in Beleriand, almost everything is in Sindarin. So there is a shift. But the names of Feanor's sons were all given in Sindarin today. Maedhros, Maglor, Celegorm, Caranthir, Curufin, Amrod, and Amras. That's all 7. There's a lot of them. But those are all Sindarin names. And I would be actually hard-pressed to remember all of their Quenya names off the top of my head. I know Maedhros is Nelia Fenway, Maglor is Kana Fenway, Celegorm. Oh gosh, I can't remember Celegorm's. I think one of them is like Telva Fenway. Basically, almost all of their names have Fenway in them. Except for the 2 twins. Amrod and Amras are called Ambarusa. But even they, it's like Tela Fenway and Pitya Fenway. Pitya being little Fenway. And all of this is done to honor Feanor's father. So he himself was named Curufenway. And Curufenway is the name that he gave his 5th son. The youngest before the twins. So Curufin is the Sindarinized version of Curufenway. But there are technically two Curufenway elves. One of them is Feyenoor, that was his given name, his father name. But he was known by his mother as Feyenoord, which is the Quenya version of his mother name. And that is then Sindarinized into Feyenoor. So hopefully that makes sense. Curufenway is Feyenoor, but he also basically named his 5th kid Feyenoord Jr., right? He named his 5th kid Curufenway as well, which I believe means skilled Fenway. Nelia Fenway is actually, which is Maedhros's father name. Nelia Fenway means 3rd Fenway, which I find amusing, because technically I guess he is. You know, there's the actual Fenway, then there's the son of Fenway, Fëanor, and then Maedhros was the 3rd in the line, so he is the 3rd Fenway. I am over at Twitch. It's the same handle as here, so WizardWayChris. So twitch.tv/WizardWayChris. Join me! Though we are going to end this relatively soon, so I'm going to open this up to questions, either over on TikTok or over on my Twitch stream. We are done with the actual reading for the day, so if there are any questions, please ask. If you'd like some more information on any of the specific elves that we've introduced today, please feel free. I love you, Gray. He's such a good boy. He's like, how dare you disturb me? I am planning on getting another webcam, and as soon as I do, I'm gonna have a kitty cam. I'll have one trained on my cats. Like you, Gray. So people can get a good look at you. He's a good boy. I love you. But yes, any questions? Any questions about today's reading? So anything about the coming of the Eldar over the sea into Valinor? Hey, Corsair, welcome! It's good to see you here. I'm sorry you've missed the reading itself, but you can always rewatch it here on Twitch. And I promise I'm going to take the time this upcoming week to actually download all of my previous streams and hopefully edit them into something coherent over on YouTube. So you should be able to enjoy the reading either here. Yes, the Princes of the Eldalier and Fëanor and the Unchaining of Melkor. That was today. So, a little bit on Fëanor. Fëanor is a stubborn guy. honestly, the one defining characteristic of Feyenoord is that he is stubborn. He truly is the most stubborn elf ever. He won't let anybody tell him what to do. Super stubborn. Once he makes up his mind about something, like, he would never turn around and change his mind. It just doesn't happen. Not because his mind doesn't actually change, but even if he had been like, I made a mistake, he would never admit to it. He would never. He is all about self-confidence. Self-confidence to the point of hubris is really the theme with Feyenoord. That he got so much of his mother's fiery spirit that he burns himself right out. And spoiler alert, he does not last long. I mean, all things considered, based on the actual timelines that were given in the other books that Tolkien put out, or rather, the History of Middle-earth, which his son Christopher Tolkien put out, it's all Tolkien's notes, but they're jumbled together. In the History of Middle-earth series, which is 12 volumes long, I believe it's in War of the Jewels, or maybe Morgoth's Ring, but they go into greater detail about Feyenoord and Melkor and the whole thing, and just we get an idea of the timeline of Amon, and each year in that section of the world building that Tolkien did, each year is a Valoran year, which I've talked about this on my TikTok before, but a Valoran year is equivalent to 144 mortal years. And that's just how time was counted until mortal men came around, whose lifespans are so much shorter that they started counting them in just solar cycles, which the elves call Loa, or Loar, plural. The shibboleth of Feyenoord, yeah, basically. Yep. I believe that's the name of the timeline that they gave. But I did the math. I have a video that's coming out on my TikTok either today or tomorrow. I did a case study on the aging specifically of Nerdanel, because we find out, I think I published the one already, about things that age you in Middle-earth. If I didn't post that already, it will be done. But things that age you in Middle-earth are trials and hardship. So if you get captured by the dark forces and tortured, that's going to age you a bit faster. Location. Those who live in Middle-earth age a little under a third faster than elves in Amon, for example. So in Amon, it is a ratio of 1 to 144. So 1 year of aging for an elf after they are fully grown, which for men is 24 and for women is 18 to 21. Once they reach maturity, every year of aging for them after that is considered 144 mortal years. For them to go 1 year in age. Not necessarily in, physical form, but they're aging, how old they feel and how old they act. But for elves in Middle-earth, instead of it being 1 to 144 mortal years, it becomes 1 to 100 mortal years. So each 100 years, they age 1 year. So they go a bit faster. It's 44 years faster for each year of age. But that actually makes it, because then it's in base 10, it makes us a lot easier to calculate an elf's perceived age. And Tolkien really, really struggled with all of this. Like, in the Nature of Middle-earth book that came out recently, he goes through 3 or 4 different versions of how to age the elves. It's over like 4 different chapters in the book. And he struggles with it because he comes up with an idea and then realizes, no, wait, this won't work because this character then isn't the right age to do all the things that I wrote them doing. So he has to sort of backwards manufacture an aging system that makes sense for all of the elves he had already written. Dennis Reynolds from It's Always Sunday gives you big Feyenoord vibes. I haven't seen it, so I don't know who you're referring to. But I'll have to check that out. Yeah, that did bite him and his children in the end, absolutely. Feyenoord's attitude is really his downfall. His unyielding personality is what gets him into a lot of trouble, because he makes up his mind, and then he single-mindedly goes after whatever he's decided to do. So he's like, I'm gonna return to I'm gonna return to Middle-earth. No one can tell him otherwise. Like, no one can tell him otherwise. And when they try, he's like, nope. Nope. Not listening to you. So even when people are like, bro, I'm not telling you no, I'm just telling you slow the heck down. Slow down before you hurt yourself and everyone around you. And he's like, no! He just does everything his own way. Like the Frank Sinatra song. I did it my way. Basically. That's hardcore Feyenoord vibe. Because he definitely makes mistakes, but he... And in my head, he's either not apologetic at all, like, that's part of who Feyenoord is. He doesn't apologize for his actions, even when he screws up. He will either blame someone else, or he won't even admit that he screwed up in the first place. He'll just be like, no, that wasn't me. I didn't do that. He's very narcissistic in my head. Like classic narcissism. Everything's about him. Because, and you know, this is, you know, not that every narcissist comes from a broken family and therefore is broken, because that's not how psychology really works. But there are consequences when you have, you know, big losses and traumatic experiences when you're young. It's, you know, it does have lasting effects on a person. And in Feyenoord's case, not having his mother around, whom he loved very much, and admired, you know, he got her fire, he got her skill with his hands. Like, that all came from his mom. And not having her around would have been really destructive for his upbringing. Because as much as I think Fenway doted on him, Fenway got remarried. And Feyenoord would then feel like he's been abandoned by both his parents. And that does stuff to you. So trying to be the best, trying to be the most skilled, trying to be always in the right, and always at the forefront, is pressure that he put on himself. And that is what ultimately brings him down. Is that need to be in that position of power and authority so that he feels like he's in control, because everything else in his life was out of his control. And he doesn't like that. So, you know, he has some serious narcissistic vibes, but it's all a defense mechanism. So, like, we can, as much as I dislike Feyenoord, I pity him as well. So, there's that. Alright, we're heading up on 11:30 my time, which means I need to sign off here, reset everything, and get ready for Don Marshall's stream. So, highly recommend, if you guys are watching, please head on over to Don's channel in the next half hour. I'm not sure if he's doing this on TikTok, but I do know he's doing it on Twitch. So head over to Don Marshall's Twitch channel. We are going to be doing a watch party of the Soviet Russian Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings. Absolutely, Lily. Thank you. Thank you so much. I do this every Saturday. And trust me, this morning I was not feeling it. I was up until 4 a.m. reading The Golden Compass. Because that's what happens. I get into a book and then I can't put it down, but I'm a horrifically slow reader, so I didn't even make that much progress. But I was enjoying reading last night, so I can't really be, upset at myself about that. So everybody prepare yourselves for the Russian Lord of the Rings watch party over on Don's channel. And if anybody is liking my t-shirt, my Thran Daddy t-shirt, which looks really good in the lighting over on my TikTok right now, these will be available once my website goes live. I'm trying out a new service, and the quality of this shirt is great. The way that it works in this new shop thing that I'm trying out is, like, I don't make any money off of the shirts. I make like a couple bucks, because otherwise shipping is outrageously expensive for people. And I don't want to do that to you guys. I would rather take a cut in my profit than charge you guys $40 for a t-shirt, which is ridiculous. I'm trying to keep everything around the 20 to 25 zone, because even that I feel like is a lot for a single t-shirt. So if y'all like my Thran Daddy shirt, this will be available on my website when it goes live. And for anybody who's curious what that is, it's www.elfboy.com, and that's elfboy, ELF-BOI. Just like I say in my videos, I'm your resident elf boy. I always spell it ELF-BOI. So that is my website, elfboy.com. If you go there now, it is currently, like, under construction, but there is a place where you can put your email address and you will get updates when I go live, when the website is open. That's where I will share any information about my workshops, my Elvish workshops, and that's also where you will be able to purchase my Starscape pendants or bookmarks or what have you. All of the hand-painted stuff that I do, as well as my t-shirts, and my essential oils, because I am still formulating. I'm on, like, the last stage of formulation for my Middle-earth oils. I have done a series of Lord of the Rings-based essential oil blends, and these are all based on locations along the journey of the Fellowship. So it starts out in Hobbiton and ends at the Grey Havens. So there are 9 blends. They all have different colored bottles that I'm using. They look really nice. There is a video about that on my TikTok, but I'm really looking forward to release those. And when I release those will be on my new website instead of over on my Etsy. So I'm basically replacing my Etsy shop with my actual website. It's gonna be nice, and then you can get everything all in one place, and you'll be able to, request Elvish translations, same website, instead of going to my Instagram. Like, everything's so spread out right now, and I want you guys to just be able to go to one website and do all the things. All the things that you want to do, you can do at one place. One-stop shop for Elf Boy content and merch. So hopefully you guys enjoy that. Could use the oils during a marathon movie watching. Absolutely. That would actually be really fun. A lot of the blends, I tried to formulate them not just how I think a place would smell, but like the plant life that I think would actually grow there. That's the thing about essential oils, is that, these are real plants that I'm taking botanicals from. So doing that, I tried to put things that I think would actually have grown in those areas all together. Except for when it comes to, Moria, because it's all underground, was a bit of a challenge, but I went really earthy with that blend, and then Mount Doom. Mount Doom is a special case, because there's nothing in Mordor. There's no living things in Mordor. So with that in mind, I changed to something that I wanted to feel alluring, because the allure of Mordor is the ring at work, right? So anyone who's, in possession of the One Ring is compelled to bring it back to Mordor, to bring it back to Sauron. And so the scent profile that I did is more of like a sweet vanilla, like a vanilla tangerine, like a spiced vanilla tangerine. It's wonderful. But it's like warm and sticky in a way that like really good desserts are. So I wanted it to be like, scrumptious, so that you could feel the appeal of Mordor, and maybe the appeal of Sauron if you are simping for Sauron. So that's the feel that I went for with that blend. But the other ones are mostly formulated to try and smell like the actual areas. Mordor was just not going to smell good, so I changed my approach on that one. But hopefully you guys will enjoy that when it goes live. I can't wait to share all that stuff with you. I need to send some samples over to Don and his wife, Miss Nat20 over there, because they both really enjoy essential oils, so I trust them to give me some good feedback on the blends before I just set them out into the world. But if the blends are super popular, I might expand to other products beyond just, roll-on essential oils, which are pre-diluted. So maybe over time I might do candles, or soap, or something like that. But those are crafts that I've never done before, so I would need to research them before I start doing them. But I think that will be all for today. I've got to go prep for the other live stream. I will see you guys over on Don Marshall's channel. That's Don Marshall 72, and that's Marshall with 2 L's. So Don Marshall 72 over here on Twitch. So everybody take care. I will be back probably midweek with a vocabulary stream, and then again Saturday for Silmarillion Saturday. So everybody take care, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!